I'd like to talk today about the two biggest social trends in the coming century and perhaps in the next 10,000 years. But I want to start with my work on romantic love, because that's my most recent work. What I and my colleagues did was put 32 people who were madly in love into a functional MRI brain scanner, 17 who were madly in love and their love was accepted, and 15 who were madly in love and they had just been dumped. And so I want to tell you about that first, and then go on into where I think love is going. What 'tis to love, Shakespeare said. I think our ancestors, I think human beings, have been wondering about this question since they sat around their campfires or lay and watched the stars 1,000,000 years ago. I started out by trying to figure out what romantic love was by looking at the last 45 years of research on just psychological research. And as it turns out, there's a very specific group of things that happen when you fall in love. The first thing that happens is what I call, a person begins to take on what I call special meaning. As a truck driver once said to me, he said, "The world had a new center, and that center was Mary Ann." George Bernard Shaw said it a little differently. He said, "Love consists of overestimating the differences between one woman and another." And indeed, that's what we do. And then you just focus on this person. You can list what you don't like about them, but then you sweep that aside and focus on what you do. As Chaucer said, love is blind. On trying to understand romantic love, I decided I would read poetry from all over the world. And I just want to give you one very short poem from 8th century China, because it's an almost perfect example of a man who is focused totally on a particular woman. It's a little bit like when you are madly in love with somebody and you walk into a parking lot, their car is different from every other car in the parking lot. Their wine glass at dinner is different from every other wine glass at the dinner party. And in this case, a man got hooked on a bamboo sleeping mat. And it goes like this. It's by a guy called Wan Chen. "I cannot bear to put away the bamboo sleeping mat. The night I brought you home, I watched you roll it out." He became hooked on a sleeping mat, probably because elevated activity of dopamine in his brain, just like with you and me. But anyway, not only does this person take on special meaning, you focus your attention on them, you aggrandize them, but you have intense energy. As one Polynesian said, he said, "I felt like jumping in the sky." You're up all night, you're walking till dawn, you feel intense elation when things are going well, mood swings into horrible despair when things are going poorly, real dependence on this person. As one businessman in New York said to me, he said, "Anything she liked, I liked." Simple. Romantic love is very simple. You become extremely sexually possessive. You know, if you're just sleeping with somebody casually, you don't really care if they're sleeping with somebody else. But the moment you fall in love, you become extremely sexually possessive of them. I think that is a Darwinian, there's a Darwinian purpose to this. The whole point of this is to pull two people together strongly enough to begin to rear babies as a team. But the main characteristics of romantic love are craving, an intense craving to be with a particular person, not just sexually, but emotionally. You'd much rather, it would be nice to go to bed with them, but you want them to call you on the telephone, to invite you out, etc., to tell you that they love you. The other main characteristic is motivation. The motor in the brain begins to crank and you want this person. And last but not least, it is an obsession. When I put these people in the machine, before I put them in the MRI machine, I would ask them all kinds of questions. But my most important question was always the same. It was, what percentage of the day and night do you think about this person? And indeed, they would say, all day, all night. I can never stop thinking about him or her. And then the very last question I would ask them, I would always have to work myself up to this question because I'm not a psychologist. I don't work with people in any kind of traumatic situation. And my final question was always the same. I would say, would you die for him or her? And indeed, these people would say yes, as if I had asked them to pass the salt. I was just staggered by it. So we scanned their brains, looking at a photograph of their sweetheart and looking at a neutral photograph with a distraction task in between so we could look at the same brain when it was in that heightened state and when it was in a resting state. And we found activity in a lot of brain regions. In fact, one of the most important was a brain region that becomes active when you feel the rush of cocaine. And indeed, that's exactly what happens. I began to realize that romantic love is not an emotion. In fact, I had always thought it was a series of emotions from very high to very low. But actually, it's a drive. It comes from the motor of the mind. The wanting part of the mind, the craving part of the mind, the kind of part of the mind when you're reaching for that piece of chocolate, when you want to win that promotion at work, the motor of the brain. It's a drive. And in fact, I think it's more powerful than the sex drive. You know, if you ask somebody to go to bed with you and they say no thank you, you certainly don't kill yourself or slip into a clinical depression. But certainly around the world, people who are rejected in love will kill for it. People live for love, they kill for love, they die for love. They have songs, poems, novels, sculptures, paintings, myths, legends. In over 175 societies, people have left their evidence of this powerful brain system. I have come to think it's one of the most powerful brain systems on earth for both great joy and great sorrow. I've also come to think that it's one of three basically different brain systems that evolved from mating and reproduction. One is the sex drive, the craving for sexual gratification. W.H. Jordan called it an intolerable neural itch. And indeed, that's what it is. It keeps bothering you a little bit like being hungry. The second of these three brain systems is romantic love, that elation, obsession of early love. And the third brain system is attachment, that sense of calm and security you can feel for a long-term partner. And I think that the sex drive evolved to get you out there looking for a whole range of partners. You can feel it when you're just driving along in your car. It can be focused on nobody. I think romantic love evolved to enable you to focus your mating energy on just one individual at a time, thereby conserving mating time and energy. And I think that attachment, the third brain system, evolved to enable you to tolerate this human being, at least long enough to raise a child together as a team. However, there's always kinds of complications in this. These three brain systems, lust, romantic love, and attachment, don't always go together. They can go together, by the way. That's why casual sex isn't so casual. With orgasm, you get a spike of dopamine. Dopamine is associated with romantic love, and you can just fall in love with somebody who you're just having casual sex with. With orgasm, then you get a real rush of oxytocin and vasopressin. Those are associated with attachment. This is why you can feel such a sense of cosmic union with somebody after you've made love to them. But these three brain systems, lust, romantic love, and attachment, aren't always connected to each other. You can feel deep attachment to a long-term partner while you feel intense romantic love for somebody else, while you feel the sex drive for people unrelated to these other partners. In short, we're capable of loving more than one person at a time. In fact, you can lie in bed at night and swing from deep feelings of attachment for one person to deep feelings of romantic love for somebody else. It's as if there's a committee meeting going on in your head as you are trying to decide what to do. So I don't think, honestly, we were an animal that was built to be happy. We were an animal that was built to reproduce. I think the happiness we find, we make, and I think however we can make good relationships with each other. So now, thank you. I want to end with a story and then just a comment. I've been studying romantic love and sex and attachment for 30 years. And I'm an identical twin. I'm interested in why we're all alike. Why you and I are alike, why the Iraqis and the Japanese and the Australian Aborigines and the people up the Amazon River are all alike. And about a year ago, an internet dating service, Match.com, came to me and asked me if I would design a new dating site for them. I said, I don't know anything about personality. You think you got the right person? They said yes. It got me thinking about why it is that you fall in love with one person rather than another. That's my current project. It will be my next book. There's all kinds of reasons that you fall in love with one person rather than another. Timing is important. Proximity is important. Mystery is important. You fall in love with somebody who's somewhat mysterious, in part because mystery elevates dopamine in the brain, probably pushes you over that threshold to fall in love. You fall in love with somebody who fits within what I call your love map, an unconscious list of traits that you build in childhood as you grow up. And I also think that you gravitate to certain people actually with somewhat complementary brain systems, and that's what I've now contributing to this. But I want to tell you a story to illustrate. I've been carrying on here about the biology of love. I want to show you a little bit about the culture of it too, the magic of it. It's a story that was told to me by somebody who had heard it just from probably a true story. It was a graduate student I'm at Rutgers, and my two colleagues, Art Aaron is at SUNY Stony Brook. That's where we put our people in the MRI machine. And this graduate student was madly in love with another graduate student. And she was not in love with him. And they were all at a conference in Beijing. And he knew from our work that if you go and do something very novel with somebody, you can drive up the dopamine in the brain and perhaps trigger this brain system for romantic love. So he decided he'd put science to work, and he invited this girl to go off on a rickshaw ride with him. And sure enough, I've never been in one, but apparently they go all around the buses and the trucks, and it's crazy, and it's noisy, and it's exciting, and he figured this would drive up the dopamine, and she'd fall in love with him. So off they go, and she's squealing and squeezing him and laughing and having a wonderful time. An hour later, they get down off of the rickshaw, and she throws her hands up, and she says, "Wasn't that wonderful? And wasn't that rickshaw driver handsome?" There's magic to love. But I will end by saying that millions of years ago, we evolved three basic drives: the sex drive, romantic love, and attachment to a long-term partner. These circuits are deeply embedded in the human brain. They're going to survive as long as our species survives on what Shakespeare called this mortal coil. Thank you.
Helen Fisher.